At the beginning of the revolution, President Diaz was functioning as a dictator over Mexico. Eventually, a group of other men created a revolution against him, and they unseated him from his presidency. After this, Francisco Madero took over as the leader of the country, but people were dissatisfied with his leadership, so he was also eventually assassinated. At this point, Huerta declared himself as the president of Mexico. Unfortunately, this didn't last very long because the United States declared that they were going to be against him as the leader. This created a lot of chaos in Mexico as the United States continued to disrupt things as they occupied the city of Veracruz. Then, when World War I began, the United States left the area and recognized Carranza as the president of Mexico. Unfortunately, the Mexicans were not satisfied with Carranza as being their leader, and eventually a man named Obregon was sworn in as the president, and this concluded the revolution.
Favorable international relations are a critical part of the Mexican Revolution because they produced a rally for the cause in Mexico, more resources for revolutionaries, and positive changes for Mexico and its citizens. Several groups of people, including the Spaniards, German, Americans, and Chinese, all created a sense of urgency for revolutionaries. Similarly, the illegal and legal arms and publicity in America were all highly beneficial tools that were useful for rebels in Mexico. Finally, assistance from Americans helped to eliminate dictatorship and cause social, economic, and cultural changes. Without the support of other countries, the quality of life for citizens would drastically decline and freedom would become unachievable.
People in leadership roles played a large part in shaping the Mexican Revolution. Some of the key leaders throughout the revolution were Diaz, Madero, Villa, Zapata, Huerta, Carranza, and Obregon. Leadership changed hands many times throughout the revolution. In the early stages, Diaz began to lose popularity within the public, and Madero declared his insurrection. He was named president roughly 1 year later, in 1911. After 2 years of Madero's presidency, he was killed, and Huerta assumed leadership. 1 year later, Huerta was exiled, and Carranza became leader. After 6 years of Carranza presidency, he would be killed, and Obregon would become the president, marking the end of the revolution.
My aspect, growing alienation and opposition among elites became a significant feature of the conflict. One of the primary causes of this during the Mexican Revolution was the perception that the revolution was a threat to their power and privileges. The elites in Mexico, which included landowners, businessmen, and politicians, had long benefited from a system of economic and political exploitation that kept the majority of the population in poverty and political deprivation. The revolution sought to dismantle the system and create a more egalitarian society. However, the elites saw the revolution as a direct attack on their way of life and their status within society. As a result, they became increasingly opposed to the revolutionary movement and sought to use their influence and resources to dismantle it.
The economic strain in Mexico was caused by two main reasons: the government corruption and labor laws for workers. Diaz, the former president at the start of the revolution, ran the country as a dictatorship. He made all the decisions for the country basically by himself or with some other high elite people. He took money from lower classes, and many workers were treated as if they were disposable. The government took the money from lower classes, not allowing the people to own much land, and created poorer regions. The next reason is labor laws. While the government was taking money from the people, Madero, the next president, rallied the workers who wanted not money, but their voices to be heard. This caused an uproar in the workers, many going on strike or leaving big industrial companies, causing a huge economic downfall.
For my aspect of the Mexican Revolution, I had the widespread popular anger at injustice occurring throughout the country. One of the most prominent sources of widespread anger was the unequal distribution of land throughout Mexico. Before the revolution, a small group of people who were in power, they controlled most of Mexico's land, using it mainly to grow crops. Meanwhile, the vast majority of the population didn't own any sort of land and just worked as laborers on this controlled land, which eventually just kind of pissed them off. Another key factor into widespread popular anger was the concentration of wealth and power being in the hands of those small group of elites, mainly Porfirio Diaz, Mexico's president at the time. His interests specifically favored the wealthy, and he suppressed any sort of resistance to his rank of power, even going as far as frequently relying on voter fraud to stay in office. So this lack of political representation and civil liberties also fueled the demands for change and widespread dissatisfaction within the country.
One part of the Mexican Revolution that is important to understand is the shared message among revolutionaries. One important piece of the message was that Mexicans felt that they were not given the opportunity to contribute to society in the ways that they wanted to. It was hard for them to get good educations because the education policies in the country at the time were very poor, and many of the politicians were dishonest in their day-to-day dealings. Additionally, revolutionaries argued that it was essential for Mexico to balance out the socio-economic policies within the nation. Additionally, the shared messages were important in maintaining the image of each leader across the revolution. There were multiple people who came in control of the presidency during the time that the revolution was taking place. Overall, there were many leaders, and all of them worked very hard to push forward their message that they were in control and they were the one who was going to be able to be the leader of Mexico moving forward into the future.